Ix is gonna wage war to conquer the planet. This comes as a shock to Shade, who wants no part in a war of aggression, so she joins up with Team Sonic. Ix takes the Master Emerald and warps back to the Twilight Cage. Our heroes chase after him, yada yada yada, Supersonic defeats Ix, and the rest of the Nocturnus are left to rot in the Twilight Cage. With their mission complete, Team Sonic heads home, but realize time had been flowing slower in the Twilight Dimension while they were gone. It felt like a few hours to them, but several years passed back on Earth, and Eggman's taken over the world since no one was there to stop him. And the game ends there, on a cliffhanger. And here's how it would have continued, straight from Sonic Chronicles lead designer Miles Holmes.
Picking it up from the cliffhanger, they come back and it's now Eggman's world, right? So that's a little bit the Back to the Future 2 kind of vibe. We talked about like Skynet in Terminator 2. You know, when you get to see the future, when you get to see what Kyle Reese is from, it's like, but it's all Eggman stuff, you know? So in this case, it's Eggman is basically unchecked by Sonic, has been able to do what he's always wanted to do, right? Take over and remake the world in his image. So a lot of the population has been rounded up and they're prisoners or they're slaves or whatever. And you've got machines. Eggman's machines are, you know, this very dystopic kind of Terminator future. So part of that would have been the fun of being able to go to, you know, famous world landmarks and seeing them remade in this Eggman style. So, you know, like going to Paris and seeing like Eggman's gear all over the Eiffel Tower, or sort of watching down with a big eye or something like that.
When Sonic and company return to Eggman's Earth, their ship crashes and everyone's scattered to the winds, so the player's following multiple parties and populating them in different locations. Always on the run, always fighting to see another day. Eventually, they get to the point where they're freeing populations from Eggman's captivity so they can build a multinational army to storm Eggman's base and restore world order. Just as they're about to do exactly that, Argus shows up. If you recall, Argus was the Mega God alluded to in the first game, much worse than Eggman. Even Supersonic's not strong enough to beat Argus, so in spite of everything, Sonic and Eggman join forces to take him down. Eggman uses his Mega Death Laser to fire Supersonic out like a bullet to break through Argus's defenses, thus ending the first boss phase. With Argus weakened, the Twilight Cage is thrown open, and everyone who is trapped inside is set free and joins in a massive climactic battle to finish off Argus once and for all. By the time everything wraps up, Knuckles is freed his fellow echidnas, along with everyone else in the cage. And together with Shade, now he's got the potential to continue his bloodline. Eggman runs off, yelling, "Until next time, Sonic!" And so, the status quo's back to normal. The end. Well, except for the final teaser. It was established in the first game that the Twilight Cage is a pocket dimension where the Nocturnus and other alien races are imprisoned, but you never know why. The truth would have been revealed in the sequel. Long ago, an oracle told Argus that someday he'd die at the hands of a mortal, so Argus traveled the universe, locking up entire races that could possibly be a threat, in hopes of escaping the prophecy of his own death. But in the final teaser, it'd be revealed that the oracle's prediction was actually a trick. By gathering up the most powerful races in the universe, Argus was unknowingly building a super team that could destroy him.
It was basically a manipulation. So we're left with this notion of, okay, well, who's the Oracle? Who's this trickster god that got him to do this in the first place? Because obviously he wanted all of this to happen. He wanted Argus defeated, and now with him out of the way, the longer question that would have held, that could have been used over the series is, okay, so we've defeated this one god, but now there's this other god that made all these things happen. Why did he do that? What was it for? And will it eventually threaten us? And you know, if the series was going to continue, then yes, obviously, this is going to be a problem, and we'll come back to it.
It wasn't another cliffhanger, more like a teaser that left room for more sequels. BioWare would have considered their work finished with this duology, but hoped another studio, or Sega themselves, would continue Chronicles as a long-running series. So that begs the question, why didn't Chronicles 2 get made? The first game sold about 1 million copies. It was BioWare's first ever handheld game, and they considered it a success. Review scores came in around 75%, pretty on par with Sonic games of that era. Chronicles was basically free money and brand exposure for Sega, so they were happy as well. In fact, Sonic Team told BioWare they wanted to use Shade and Argus in their own games, and the BioWare guys were thrilled to hear it. But there was one little problem: the Sonic comics. A lot of the comics published from 1994 to 2006 were authored by Ken Penders. In Ken's view, the characters he created for the comics belonged to him, not Sega. Shade in Chronicles is similar to Knuckles' girlfriend Julie Sue from Knuckles the Echidna issue 4. Likewise, the Nocturnus clan bears resemblance to the Dark Legion from issue 1, the Twilight Cage is akin to the Twilight Zone from issue 17, and so on. Ken started copywriting all his creations 2 months after Chronicles launched, then a series of lawsuits kicked off between Ken, Sega, BioWare, and the comic book publisher. Sega's position was basically that they own the Sonic brand, therefore they own the rights to everything published in Sonic Comics. Long story short, Sega wanted the fight to stay between Ken and the comic book company, but ultimately got pulled in anyway, and the whole thing dragged on for years.
You know, I find it very puzzling, honestly. I've worked with other people's IP for a long time, as he has, and I've never had any kind of notion that I own anything that I'm doing in somebody else's sandbox. I think if Sega had taken him seriously and litigated properly, it very quickly would have gone away. But it was probably a series of unforced errors that led to the result that we got.
We reached out to Ken so he could give his side of the story. You can pause and read his full response if you like, because some of the legal details aren't otherwise findable online. But to sum it up, he sees himself as a small creator defending his work from billion-dollar corporations who want to take it for themselves. Those corporations owe him millions of bucks for using it in Sonic Chronicles, and their lawyers couldn't convince a judge that Ken was off his rocker. Maybe Sega feels they should own these characters, but they never had that in writing. More recently, Ken made some artwork for Sonic NFTs to establish stronger legal ownership over his characters, and Sega haven't tried to stop him. Maybe because they know they can't. They're priced at $100,000 each, in case you're curious. Ken says he's not an unreasonable man. If Sega ever wants to pay him for the rights to make Sonic Chronicles 2, he'll happily sit down at the negotiating table. Keep in mind, all that's Ken's words, not ours, and we gave this script to both Miles and Ken before publication to make sure we presented everything accurately and without bias. As for who's right, well, that's for you to decide. Either way, there's never going to be any re-releases of Sonic Chronicles or a sequel until a deal's made in the courts. That'll probably never happen, which means Sonic Chronicles 2 will never be anything more than the plot outline you heard in this video.